I'm old enough to remember when cyber attacks were actually big news, right? They would happen and people would like flip out and you'd try to figure out if you got compromised or whatever. And it seems like lately there have been just so many cyber attacks over the years that we've sort of become complacent. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, there's a cyber attack on whoever, Target. It's like, I wonder if I got, no, I'm probably not compromised. Or the other train of thought is, oh, I'm probably compromised and I've been compromised for a long time. I just got to keep changing my passwords and yada, yada, yada. There are different trains of thought, but we're not sitting there like freaking out over every single cyber attack. And I agree. I'm not a big fan of freaking out over things that don't seem to really massively impact us, right? But what if what we're seeing right now is actually bigger than just your run-of-the-mill series of cyber attacks? What if this is all a preparation for something bigger? There are steps that we can and should take in order to not just protect ourselves. I'm not talking about just getting malware protection and all that stuff. I'm saying that we need to assume as a society that at some point in the future, whether that's tomorrow or next week or next month or next year or next decade or at some point, that there will be the big one, the massive cyber attack that does change the world. And how you prepare yourself today can have a direct impact on whether or not this will be something that you can survive or whether you and so many other tens or even hundreds of millions of Americans will be dramatically affected by it. There's an ex-user called Unfiltered with Kells, Kels. You can find her handle is unfiltered, and then the letter W, and then Kels. She put this post up there, and it was compelling. I got to admit, she was making a lot of sense. I'll play her video here in a second, but I want to read what she wrote in her post. She said, most people scroll past stories like this, and like I said in the beginning, she's absolutely right. You hear cyber attack, oh my gosh, and then you move on. A cyber attack hits a major medical supplier. Payment systems warnings start appearing in different countries. Massive investments into power grids and data infrastructure quietly continue. Individually, these headlines don't seem like much, but when you start looking at them together, it raises a question worth asking. What would actually happen if our digital systems were suddenly disrupted? Our banking, hospitals, supply chains, and our power. Sweden, one of the most cashless societies in the world, is already warning civilians to keep cash on hand in case payment systems fail during a crisis. I'm not saying anything is happening tomorrow. Also, BlackRock and Larry Fink have been up to some interesting things these last couple of months. I'm just saying it might be a good time to start paying attention. Well, this is your wake-up call, folks. Let's go ahead and play her post, and then I will give you my insights on the other side.
A cyber attack just hit a major U.S. medical company called Stryker Corporation. Stryker manufactures and distributes medical equipment used in hospitals all over the world. Their manufacturing, shipping, and order processing have all been disrupted because of this attack. Now, why am I telling you this? Because there are a couple things about this situation that I feel we should be paying attention to. Our entire economy today is almost completely digital. Payments, banking, supply chains, hospital infrastructure, almost everything that we rely on is connected to digital systems. I also can't ignore that Klaus Schwab once talked about how a large-scale cyber attack could have an impact even bigger than many global crises.
Pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
Now, according to some cybersecurity researchers, the reason that Stryker may have been targeted is because the company has business ties connected to Israel. So this isn't just a random attack. But here is something else that I have been looking into this week because I've always feared that this may happen, and I started noticing this Over the last couple of months, one of the largest investment firms in the world, BlackRock, has been investing heavily in infrastructure, power grids, energy systems, AI data centers, airports, critical infrastructure. And the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, has heritage, strong global financial influence, and sits in many of the same international circles and organizations like the World Economic Forum. At the same time, the central bank in Sweden, one of the most cashless societies in the world, is now warning people to keep cash on hand in case digital systems go down during a crisis. My pattern recognition could be off, it might not be. But if the grid does go down, if digital systems go down, almost everything in our daily lives stops working. It's better to be prepared than not. I'm not going to say that it's happening tomorrow, but I do think that it is something that people should start paying attention to. I do firmly believe that we are going to see this happen in our lifetime. So pay attention, especially to what's happening all over the world and in the European countries, because they are just steps ahead of us.
One of the things that she tried to highlight in the video, but if you're just listening, you couldn't see it. In fact, she was highlighting that Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, is Jewish. Now, the cyber attack on Stryker has been attributed to Iran. And I've said for a long time, long before the war, that there are two things that Iran is very good at from that makes them an actual threat. And that is drones and cyber attacks. They're very good at both. And we're seeing the drone aspect of it during this war. I think that I had noted recently that it seems as if perhaps we underestimated their drone capabilities. I hate to say it. For the United States and Israel to both be caught off guard, but they knew how to stop the missiles. The drones, again, I'm not there, but the little information we're getting, it seems like the drones are sort of being effective, right? And again, that's been their top priority. Drones they can be made quickly, they can be made inexpensively, and they can be very effective, as Iran is showing. And as we knew before, just the drones back and forth between Ukraine and Russia. I mean, it's to the point where we're actually asking, the U.S. military is asking the Ukrainian military for some advice on how to handle the drones. That's, again, not saying that we were caught completely off guard, but it sure seems like we weren't prepared for it. Now, when it comes to the cybersecurity aspect of it, cyber attacks, Iran is top 3 or 4 in the world. Okay, they are up there with the United States, with China, with Israel, okay, right there with North Korea. They're good. And this is something they put a lot of emphasis, a lot of their brain power into. And it has been shown to be relatively effective over the years. And I would say more effective from a military perspective than even North Korea. North Korea, they are good at financial cyber attacks, as is China. China's good at getting military secrets, but it seems as if when it comes to full-blown offensive cyber attacks, Iran, like I said, is top 3 or 4 in the world. Now, let's go beyond Iran. Let's say, their infrastructure is sort of toast, which we can assume that in many ways it is. That includes internet. Let's say that their proxies outside of Iran are doing what they can, and maybe they were the ones that hit Stryker. Who knows? Point is that this threat is not relegated to just Iran. This threat is one that when you have people like Klaus Schwab and Larry Fink and pretty much the entirety of the World Economic Forum, the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, the United Nations, all of the various globalist organizations have been talking about cybersecurity for a very long time. It's time for us to take serious interest in self-preservation. Now, you might think, well, I've got my Bitdefender, I've got Norton, I got whatever, I've got my antivirus, what more can I do? There's a lot more that we can do, okay? And first and foremost, I know this is going to sound maybe a little off, considering that we're dealing with technology, but I am a firm believer that our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that God, that the Holy Spirit has influence over everything. Just because something's technological doesn't mean it's outside of the realm of the of the faithful or the spiritual, if you will. So, yes, pray. Pray that you and your family are protected. Next, try to isolate yourself as much as possible from the digital world. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go completely off grid, but that's not an awful idea. I mean, considering the way things are, depending upon your resources and your situation, your familial situation, your personal situation, it might make sense to, at the very least, prepare to go off grid. That doesn't mean that you have to sell everything you got and go run off to your bunker homestead hidden in the mountains. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to prepare your bunker homestead hidden in the mountains and a way to get there in case things start going south. But we don't panic here, okay? One of the ideas of being a late prepper is that there's no need to panic, just identify, look where the exit signs are, and walk in an orderly fashion towards the exit ramp, okay? That doesn't mean you have to sprint. We're not in sprinting phase yet. You just want to be prepared and positioned properly if and when that time does come. So, yes, if you can either go off grid or prepare to go off grid, that would be great. But let's say that you can. Let's say that what, 90% of us cannot go down that road. We don't have the resources for a second hidden bunker somewhere, and where maybe we don't even have the resources for a singular hidden bunker, because they're not necessarily cheap. They don't have to be expensive like modern real estate, especially out here in California, but they do. I mean, it takes money, right? Let's say that you don't have the resources for that. Here's how you get prepared to wean yourself off of. It's time to make backups. If you can afford to get a hard drive, I'm talking a big one, depending upon how much stuff you've got, get yourself a big hard drive, terabytes, not gigabytes, terabytes or larger worth of storage, and start storing as much as you can on there. Protected server, and don't rely on Dropbox or any of these other online versions of storage. And I'm not saying that you have to cancel those, but don't rely on them. And by golly, stop putting anything of importance on them. Your Dropbox should not have a copy of your driver's license. Your OneDrive or whatever digital storage you have should not have a copy of your birth certificate or anything of importance. Okay? You want a backup? Make it a physical backup. Make it someplace close. Make it something where you've got it in the physical hard drive in your hands, safely put away in a Faraday bag in a fireproof safe. Okay? Best place to put it. Make sure that it's somewhere where if there's a fire, if there's anything, that you don't lose your stuff. Now you might say, well, is it bad to have a digital backup? Absolutely not. Okay, I'm not saying that you can't have a Dropbox or anything with the stuff in it. I'm saying that don't have that as the only point of access for it. And if you do, try to use the most secure. I will get into digital security in a future episode. We're not talking about digital cybersecurity. I'm talking about actual full-blown digital security, because we do sometimes need to put things such as crypto in secure online formats, and there are ways to do it that are safer than others. But make sure that you do have a backup of everything that you could possibly want or need, and that does include personal stuff. That includes videos, okay? That includes pictures of friends, of loved ones. That includes videos of kids' recitals that you shot 10 years ago or anything like that. Get it all. The memories are going to be important as well. And yes, I would strongly suggest getting how-to videos. Download them any way you can through YouTube or whatever, because knowledge is going to be extraordinarily important in that type of situation. And you don't even have to watch them necessarily now. I've got an entire library of videos that I will watch if and when things go really south. I've got them, of course, secured on a physical hard drive, attached to. I've got my solar chargers. I can watch these videos in the future if we're ever stuck in a bunker or something like that, right? Now, these videos will be, I'm trying to think of some good examples. I've got several farming videos, several videos that show visuals of recognizing herbs and stuff like that. First aid, I've got a lot of first aid video, not a lot, but a couple of first aid videos. Auto repair. I've got some auto repair videos. You never know if it's like a Mad Max future, right? where cars are important, and you want to figure out, okay, so how do I make my car tank like thing that I can go fight the horde of weirdos in their cars with stuff. You never know. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. And yes, there is some entertainment in there. I have the entire Bible in audio format, just in case. And people that say, "Oh, don't you're a big proponent of using a physical Bible?" Yes, I am. But what if? Just saying. I'm not saying what if there's a situation where maybe I can't see or read anymore. Okay, it'd be good to have an audio version of the Bible, and I have that, and it didn't take much time or take up much space to download. Whatever, and you if you get into the mentality, you're going to remember things. You're going to think, oh, this is a good one that I need to take and put into my, we'll call it your prepper digital archive, right? And you're getting it all downloaded and put into safe storage again within a Faraday bag, a hard drive, a large hard drive, Faraday bag inside a safe, and then having backups of the backup, having two copies, not a bad idea either. I'm just saying, someplace where you can put it perhaps in your car in a Faraday bag, and hopefully a fireproof container of some sort within your vehicle. Places like that. Start thinking along those lines. So that is how to protect against a digital apocalypse. Because here's the thing, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but the big threat, the big risk when it comes to cyber attacks, it's not that you're going to get hacked, or it's not that you're going to get things stolen from you. It's that the entire internet goes down. And while we might think, well, we've had internet outages before, no, I'm talking about for days, weeks, or months. And if that happens, there will be mass chaos. I cannot express this enough. So many people, I know somebody who I had to ask him one day. I'm like, what would you do if crap hits the fan? And he's like, I have no idea. I never really thought about that. He has a bank. His credit union. He has an online credit union. I'm like, where's the, what's the nearest physical location? And he didn't know. And we went to look it up. And as it turned out, there are no physical locations. This credit union literally is online only. I'm like, holy cow, that seems sort of risky, don't you think? And he's like, yeah, I guess so. So, yeah, if the internet goes down for an extended period of time, there will be mass chaos. Mass chaos, at least in Western society. Things won't be very different in certain societies. Maybe they'll be a little bit different, but because don't forget, almost everything is attached and operates in some form or fashion online. And depending upon what type of online outage it is, if it's an EMP-based one where we don't have access to GPS either, we don't have access to maps, we don't have access to communications. It's not just not being able to check your email or download your crypto or anything like that. It's access to medical records, access to ownership, to property records. A whole bunch of stuff is moved online. And there I shouldn't say can, there will be, again, mass chaos if there is such a cyber attack. And that is, by the way, before you think, oh, that's not possible, that is the exact scenario that has been gamed out by the globalists at the World Economic Forum. I forgot what their cybersecurity council thing, but the war game that they played is one where the internet is down for, it was either 2 weeks or 2 months, but they demonstrated that basically there's nothing they can do. I mean, they were like, look, if the internet goes out in Western society for, again, either 2 weeks or 2 months, then there would be a full-blown societal collapse. Because even, you might be like, well, I can go without the internet for a while, and that's a naive way to look at it, because there's a lot of people that just cannot. If they lose access to it, they will start to panic. And if they start to panic, maybe they start to panic towards you or towards your loved ones or towards society. Things start burning, and it's that trigger that launches basically an internal apocalypse. Martial law comes in, but you can't really communicate that, right? Because people they don't know how to activate their hand cranked radios. They don't know where to tune in. Okay. So many people just wouldn't know how to handle a world without digital access. And when I say so many people, I would say at least a quarter. I might be being generous. It might be half. There might be a whole bunch of even older people out there that no longer know what it's like to have to pick up a map and actually physically read an actual physical map in their hands. So, yeah, chaos, devastation, ugliness. So that's one thing you can and should do is get everything backed up. The second thing you should do, and this is really the only other thing outside of, you pray, you get your backups onto your hard drive, and then item number 3 is to detach yourself as much as possible from online necessity. That's not to say that, again, I'm not saying that you have to go off grid completely, though that wouldn't be an awful idea, but making sure that you have pathways to accomplish anything that you would need to accomplish if there is a massive cyber attack that takes out the internet. Detach yourself from reliance on the internet. Now, that's easy to say, and it's a lot more complicated than what we're going to cover in today's show. But just as the example that I used earlier, if you have a physical, or if you have let's say a digital credit union or a digital bank or whatever, and everything is digital, find out if things go south, where do you go to pull out your cash, right? Because a lot of people are going to be trying to pull out their cash, and the ATMs are going to be shut down or broken or whatever. So you're going to have to go to a physical location. By that time, the bank run might already be over, and you might not be able to get any of it. But let's say you can, okay? You still need to know physically where it is. Like I said, it's the friend that I was telling you about. It's not like they said right off the bat, oh, there are no, I don't know where the nearest one is. It wasn't just that he didn't know. He didn't realize that there were no physical locations. He just, I don't know. I just never had to. So let's go look it up. And we did, and none. Zero. Doesn't exist. Find out where your physical locations are. And find out where everything is, where your medical records are stored, where everything that you have is. Get physical paper copies. I know this sounds crazy. Physical paper copies of every important document that you have. And again, store them. You don't need to store them in a Faraday bag, obviously, but you do need to store them in a fireproof container, and preferably a fireproof portable container within a fireproof non-portable container, like a safety bag within a safe. That way, if things do go very, very south and you got to bug out, you're ready to go. You open up your safe, you grab your firearms, your silver coins, your Bitcoin on the thumb drive, and your hard drive backup, and then your bag with all your physical documents. You throw that in your go bag, and you're out. You're heading towards your bunker in Montana, taking the side roads, of course, with somebody riding shotgun, holding an actual physical shotgun. Yeah, that's the scenario as it should, hopefully, Lord willing, play out. Now, it doesn't always do it the way that we think. As a matter of fact, it never goes the way that we think, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't prepare for such a thing. So I want to be very crystal clear about something. No need to fearmonger. If you can't do any of those things, if you don't want to do any of those things, if it's not practical for you to even try to do those things, don't worry. Don't sweat it. Okay? Again, I've always pointed that if the only true form of preparation that you need is preparation for your soul. If, let's say, things do start to go south, the internet goes out, or some other form of cyber attack takes out the grid, takes out whatever, takes out everything. In that situation, if you are not physically prepared with everything that you need, as long as your soul's prepared, it's not, you got the basics covered. Does that mean that you're going to avoid suffering? No, you won't. You'll probably suffer. But again, in the whole scheme of things, when you're looking at eternity, what is a few days, weeks, months, or even years of suffering? Seems like a long time to us, but it won't be a long time in eternity. So make sure, above all else, that you have your salvation secured. Believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Get baptized, repent, and live your life transformed, born again. And in that scenario, in that situation, once you get there, or if you've already gotten there, then cyber attack, Oh, wow. Rucker was right. Should have listened or couldn't listen to him, no big deal. But he's also right that I have nothing to fear. As long as you have that hope in your heart and in your mind and in your soul, then hey, it's a little bit of suffering with no internet for a couple of weeks, right? We've seen tons of fraud exposed across the United States, in Minnesota, in Maine, in California, Ohio, and it's happening everywhere. Those are just the areas, amongst others, that have been given a highlight because somebody ambitious, usually a journalist, but occasionally, your occasional Dr. Oz style bureaucrat has gone out and said, "Hey, let's focus on this." And the reality is that in many of these cities, many of these states, you can take a rock and throw it in any direction in any major city, and you're going to hit fraud most of the time. That's just the nature of American politics today. It has been for a long time, to be clear. This isn't new. It's just evolved. And now the corruption, the fraud, the scandals, they are becoming harder and harder to identify. But on the other hand, they're becoming easier to identify. It just takes somebody willing to look. Unfortunately, the uniparty swamp, led by the Democrats, but with some, I'm sure there are some Republicans involved, though we haven't really caught very many of those yet. But you can see that Democrat-run cities, they tend to find ways to elevate themselves as well as the people, the minions that they're able to recruit, such as the Somalis running daycares in Minneapolis, as an example, or the various multiple groups of mostly Eastern European immigrants in Los Angeles that are running these fake hospices, right? Hospice care facilities. Well, there's one area that has not been properly addressed yet. One measurement of fraud that is so deep, so vast, so huge that I think a lot of times it gets missed simply because it would be by far the most challenging to truly identify. And that is what many people are starting to call the homelessness industrial complex. This isn't just a scam. It's an entire industry. And we're going to take a look at it, especially as it pertains to one particular story in the city of Los Angeles.
The current food crisis is only going to get worse. Now is the time to secure long-term food you can store at home so you'll never stand in the government's bread lines. Visit jdrucker.com/food. That's jdrucker.com/food.
We have this story parked over at patriot.tv. LA Beachside Hotel, the city bought for the homeless, is a microcosm of California Democrat policies. And we can extend that out because it's happening in Seattle, it's happening in Portland, it's happening in Boston, it's happening in so many, not all, but many of the Democrat-run cities, major cities across the nation. The reason that it's not happening in all of them is because it is an extraordinarily complex scam. This isn't like, okay, we'll just set up a little fund that'll pay for daycares in Minneapolis, and then we'll go recruit a bunch of people to run these so-called daycares, and the flow of money will go down and then back up and then back down and then back up, and some of it will go to terrorist groups. Just it's one pretty easy scenario to set up. Whereas when it comes to homelessness, the prize is grand. The potential to get caught is minimal, and I'll explain both of those things here in a second. But the reason that it's not everywhere is because it does take a series of actions taken by politicians, taken by corporations within the areas, within these blue cities, for it to work. Because otherwise it doesn't work. Again, this is a complex confidence scheme that they are employing against the people. Let's start with the bullet points. The city of and we're going to focus on this one individual hotel, because it is, you take this, you expand it out 5 times, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, and now you've got the essence of the homelessness industrial complex. The city of Los Angeles bought a former Ramada Inn near Venice Beach in December 2020 for $8 million to provide interim homeless housing. Property housed some individuals temporarily, but it was emptied in October 2022 for conversion to permanent supportive housing. That's okay. All sounds good so far, right? Makes sense. Project delays, including 20 months of permitted and financing gaps, left the building vacant for years. Construction began in October of 2025, expected to be complete by December of this year. The total costs reached approximately $20 million, equating to about $625,000 per room for the 32-unit site. Now let's stop right there. This is one of the reasons why it is so difficult for people to catch, because the amounts are staggering enough that becomes the focus. Okay, this story came from, I believe it was New York Post initially, or California Post as they're calling the California version of it now, which I like. I like how they're doing that. But anyway, the way that, that the story is, oh my gosh, taxpayers are paying $625,000 per unit for homeless people, and right now there's not even any homeless people living there. Okay, but eventually there will be, allegedly, and we'll see if that happens. But that's like, oh my gosh, we could have bought a tiny home and put it somewhere. We could have rented an apartment for like a decade or whatever. However you want to word the waste, that becomes the focus point, and that's by design. To be clear, this isn't like, let's make it streamlined, let's make it efficient so that nobody notices. No, they want you to notice. They want you, they being the people who are perpetrating the scams, they want you to focus on stories like these, because it's a point of outrage. It's like, okay, well, that's really, really bad. Our leaders are so stupid. And then they can come back and say, well, it's because of this, it's because of that, or they could ignore it altogether. And either way, that becomes the focal point of both investigations as well as any journalistic inquiries into it, because that's a story. It's a story that this is a boondoggle, and that's what draws the attention. But the reality is that behind the scenes, the things that are happening, not just with this particular hotel, but with, again, the entirety of the homeless industrial complex in each major city, including Los Angeles. What actually is the big fish here to catch would be the taxpayer money being funneled to these various programs that are supposed to do something that is untraceable. So just as an example, let's say, and I'm going to use a quote-unquote hypothetical, but this is based upon real-world events that have happened. I have to be very careful, to be clear, because these are bold accusations that I would be making. And if I were to use the names or point at particular corporations or NGOs or anything like that in this whole scam, then yeah, I open myself up for lawsuits. So we're going to talk about a hypothetical. This is for entertainment purposes only, right? But hypothetically speaking, let's say that the city, we'll call it Los Angeles, they are able to pass some form of legalese that says, okay, we're going to sink $100 million into a program that is designed to make sure that the homeless are reached one by one individually, given an opportunity to go get the help that they need, and that they're reached at least once a month. Okay. And it will equip the people that are doing this, will equip them with anything they need, whether it's, literature, or the ability to actually transport people who ask for help, or, clean needles, or whatever. In one case, they actually were promoting giving out booze to homeless alcoholics. That way, they're doing so in a controlled environment and they're not out there harming people or whatever. Okay, so So there we got $100 million, right? We're going to get this passed. People are going to support it. Everybody's going to be happy, and it's going to be out there. And then we take this and we contract with somebody who maybe have, here's a company that's willing to do it, and they have this shell company that's covering them up, and then the shell company is paying off this other company, and then you start to follow the money just a little bit, and it's hard. It's not like, again, this isn't like trying to follow the bureaucratic pathways in Minnesota or Minneapolis when it comes to daycares. This is actually a very thickly layered series of webs that you have to try to navigate through just to find out where all the money is going, where it's coming from, and how it's being used. But when it comes to homelessness, compared to, say, a daycare where there's a physical building that you can go check, when it comes to homelessness, it's just everybody's on the honor system, right? Why? Because where are you going to check? They're homeless. That means that by the very nature of their existence, they can't be checked. And we've seen that time and again. There was an interview, this is done probably, 3 or 4 months ago. And I believe it was Seattle. It could have been Portland. I get them confused sometimes because they are so very similar. But either Portland or Seattle, they talked to this homeless man who had been homeless for like 15 years. Okay. And you could tell that, like, sometimes maybe they're a little off, or there's a little bit of insanity, or maybe there's a lot of mental illness there. In this particular case, this was a gentleman. He was older, not old, not elderly, but he was older, and he had been on the streets for about 15 years, off and on, but mostly on the streets, and he'd gotten pretty good at it. He was he knew how to panhandle. He knew how to survive. He was a survivor. And they told him, this reporter pulled him aside, and they're like, what do you see on a regular basis? You're out here, you're in the streets. Do you get approached by people? Do you get offered help with this, that, or the other? And he's like, no, I think the last time I saw somebody was probably, 3 or 4 years ago, and yada, yada, yada. And they're like, oh, wow, that's really interesting, because by the mandate, they're supposed to be trying to contact you and reach out to you and offer you assistance at least once every 3 months. And he's like, well, no. It's like, I would, in some cases, I'm open to accepting certain types of assistance. I don't want to live out on the street. I would love the opportunity to do this, that, or the other, but nobody ever comes to me. And it's not like I'm hiding. I've been in the same general vicinity for the last 5 or 6 years. And here I am, I'm out in the open. No, nobody's ever, I haven't spoken to anybody. There was a kid a few years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, that I talked to, but that's about it. They offered me like needles or something, and I declined because I don't do drugs. It's like, okay, well, did you know that they actually spend like $75,000 a year to reach out to you? He's like, why didn't $75,000? What? It's like, yeah, they're supposed to be offering you this, that, or the other. He's like, look, I am right here. Okay. I'm in the heart of the homeless population here in Seattle or Portland, right? I'm out in the open. It's not like I'm hiding anywhere, and I can tell you with a certainty that nobody is coming and asking us if they want to help. Okay, and these were programs that were to the tunes of billions of dollars that were being apparently wasted, because here's a guy, eyewitness, and we see, that's anecdotal, but we see these stories constantly. So where does the money go? Where's the help? Is that to say that every single homeless program is fake? No, not every single one. But if somebody were able to dive deep and really explore this, I bet you they would find, not bet you, I know, they would find that many, if not most, if not nearly all of these programs are not operating in the way that they're supposed to. That there's a lot of numbers that are flying out, but those numbers are always unverifiable. Why? Because, again, we're talking about homelessness. We're talking about the ultimate black hole where corrupt money can go in. Well, I should say taxpayer money can go in, and then money can corruptly be distributed to the appropriate people. And if everybody's getting paid for it, nobody's going to get caught, because everybody's not just benefiting from it, they're also complicit in it. Once they accept that money, once you have this shell company that takes in the money to operate these things. They have to go out and hire people, and they tell people this is what you're supposed to do and this is what you're supposed to say, and it's going to be hard, but here's what you do, and as long as the numbers are there, as long as you're checking the boxes on the forms and the paperwork, maybe you don't actually have to go out and offer the blankets. It's kind of risky after all, I mean, just saying, not saying, just saying. And, we'll pay nicely for it. So now the people at the base level, they are tied into this in a potentially illegal, at the very least immoral, but potentially illegal way. And so are the companies. And then so are now that money is then being filtered back up through whoever's buddy or cousin or separate vendor or whatever. And then, of course, the money goes back into campaign funds. This is the cycle. And the cycle makes sure that everyone involved is ensnared in some way. They're all benefiting from it in some way, and now they're all ensnared in some way. They can't blow the whistle without getting themselves in trouble. Now you could say, well, but surely they could blow the whistle, because if they blow the whistle, they could do so with immunity, and then they wouldn't be the ones getting in trouble. But guess what? Why would they? Why would they? It's not like they're out there recruiting, the best and the brightest. They're recruiting oftentimes people that are either hoping to get away with something, or people that maybe start off thinking they're going to do the right thing and realizing that it's almost impossible. There was a story, I think it was today, as a matter of fact, story coming out of this person, I believe it was LA, as a matter of fact, where, a longtime homeless advocate was like beaten down with a pipe. Why? For passing out blankets or something. I don't know. I didn't read the story. I just saw the headline. But I will be reading the story a little bit later. Point is that those stories aren't rare. That's not uncommon. That end result is, unfortunately, the end result for so many of these things. So how do these corrupt politicians, corrupt bureaucrats, corrupt corporations, and corrupt individuals, how do they avoid getting caught? Because nobody's talking, everybody's on the take, everybody's complicit, and the homeless just don't know any better. President Trump stirred up a hornet's nest last month when he signed an executive order calling for glyphosate production to increase, for herbicides to be more prominent because they were a national security concern. In other words, for the food production mechanism of the United States of America to improve, for food prices to be reduced, we needed to bow to Monsanto, which is, of course, now owned by Bayer. Now, those of us who have been following Monsanto over the years, the decades, know the challenges. We are very well aware of all of the hidden science, the real science that has been covered up regarding glyphosate and other chemicals used, especially in Roundup. Now, there have been many lawsuits. There are still tons of lawsuits out there, but apparently those are just going to fall by the wayside as President Trump did what some consider to be a betrayal. But here's the question. Number one, was it really a betrayal? And if so, is Robert F. Kennedy also implicated in that betrayal of the MAHA movement, of the health of the United States of America? Or was it a necessary ploy in the short term that can, and hopefully, Lord willing, will produce greater fruit, pun intended, in the future? I think that if we really look at this and take responsibility and actions, that this could actually end up being a very good thing.
The current food crisis is only going to get worse. Now is the time to secure long-term food you can store at home so you'll never stand in the government's breadlines. Visit jdrucker.com/food. That's jdrucker.com/food.
I would say very few, definitely less than half of Americans consider food to be an actual globalism issue. Maybe many of you look at it as something that is really not a huge concern for us here in the United States of America. Sure, food prices are going up, but most of us are eating. We're not starving. We're not going days at a time without access to food. And those who are, they have methods and ways that we can get them fed. It's far from perfect. It can definitely be improved and should be improved amongst churches as well as community organizations. I'm not a huge fan of government getting too involved in, for example, feeding the homeless. They've just never done a very good job of that, especially in blue states, as we've covered in the past, very recent past. But the globalists do consider food to be an extremely important component of their agenda. As a matter of fact, it was Henry Kissinger, the modern day godfather of globalism, who had said at one point, who controls the food supply controls the people. Now, he went on to talk about energy and money, but he started, the premise of his control mechanism was food. And you need to be able to control the people in order to control the continents, in order to control the world. And that is through food. Food is something that, and you can throw water into that mix, as we've learned, especially in many parts of Africa. Food and water are control mechanisms that are practically unbreakable. In other words, if you can prevent the people from having access to food and control that access, then you have total control over the people. There's nothing they can do other than potentially rise up and revolt against you. And in today's world, that is becoming increasingly less likely based upon the technology and the security and all of that stuff. But they do view it as an important component, which is why I was disappointed, admittedly, when President Trump signed the executive order, because this does play into their hands. To be clear, Monsanto, Bayer, Roundup, glyphosate, it all comes down to one thing. We can say it's about the health concerns. We could say it's about whatever. But if you go back to the origins of all of this, the origins of not just the science and the politics, but also the cultural impact of Roundup and glyphosate and the way that it has changed farming in the United States so dramatically. This is a variation of control that is unambiguous. If you're a farmer, you know it. You know that you're under the thumb, the control of those who are demanding that you either play ball or you risk ending or being ended, essentially. And that's what is so infuriating about this executive order. But then again, I also understand, and it really took listening to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. going around and explaining it to get me to calm down just a notch. And it's not that he said anything that I didn't know. He just reminded me of the position that we're in. If we were to have our way, then by our way, I'm talking about the MAHA movement. If we were to say, you know what, glyphosate, bad, kills people, let's eliminate it, let's outlaw it altogether. If that were to happen, there would be a food collapse. It would be unavoidable here in the United States of America. The only thing that we could possibly do is to start mass importing food, and there are, of course, logistical challenges, not to mention the economic impact of such things. Of course, farms would go under. It would be a tremendous amount of short-term pain that, if not handled correctly, could turn into permanent pain. In other words, it could destroy the United States of America. There is a decent chance of that happening if we were to pull the plug on glyphosate overnight. So the solution, as far as I'm concerned, I even voiced this last month, the solution would be, fine, you say that it's necessary today for the sake of national security, for the sake of food security, for keeping prices at a relatively low amount to avoid hyperinflation of food and to all that stuff. Great. Okay, fine. But accompany it with a separate executive order, or call for the legislation, or do whatever, make a speech, I don't care. And Robert F. Kennedy did some of this, but basically say, yes, we need it now, but our long-term goal and the actions that we're taking will demand that we wean ourselves off of this and turn the United States into an organic and or regenerative farming nation. Through organic farming is good. Regenerative farming is even better. And any of you who have never had, oh my gosh, we we get this. We have this out here in California. We have a local market delivery service, right? Relatively inexpensive. Like it's not much more. We're talking about dollars, not tens or hundreds of dollars. Okay, it's dollars more than if we were to hop in the car and go down to Sprouts or Trader Joe's or any of those places. And obviously, it's more expensive than just going to a regular grocery store. But then, you have to make a choice. Are you willing to poison your kids with ultra processed foods and glyphosate and chemicals and plastics and all that other stuff, or do you want to spend the additional money to get the higher quality stuff? And even the higher quality stuff isn't always perfect. You have to be very careful with that. That's a discussion for another day. Okay? And I know I'm rambling, but bear with me. It's important. We have this service that actually works with regenerative farmers. And the meat, which is almost always, I wouldn't say always, but it's over 50% of the time it's sold out. And we can't get this particular brand of meats that are just fantastic. It's all regenerative, all sustainable, and all those fancy words that are usually associated with leftists. But by golly, if there's one area where they got something right, it is in this regard. It is in going after the food. And I don't think today it really is even a left versus right thing. It comes down to almost really awareness. And therein lies the key to how we can take advantage of President Trump's unfortunate executive order. And whether you can say it's unfortunate that he made it or unfortunate that he had to make it, I don't care about the politics of it. It sucks that it's done and that we are now a glyphosate-focused nation. We have been for a while, but we doubled down on it last month with the executive order, right? Well, now we do have this opportunity. And we have this article over at basedunderground.com that dives into this and I was actually very impressed when I read it. It's like, whoa, hey, somebody, one of my authors is pretty darn aligned with my perspective. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a relatively long article, but I do suggest you read it. But I will touch on the bullet points. President Trump recently signed an executive order boosting domestic production of glyphosate-based herbicides, invoking national security concerns. This move has sparked backlash from the Make America Healthy Again, the MAHA movement, and advocates who argue it underscores the urgent need to abandon chemical-dependent agriculture. And that's really, for those who don't know what regenerative farming is, it is farming naturally, I guess, is the easiest way to put it. Not using herbicides, not using hormones, not using anything that is not... Basically, the way that one regenerative farmer explained to me, he said basically anything that wasn't really commonly available to farmers in the 1950s or earlier, that's what we want to do today. We have the science. It's not like we have to go back to the old ways. We have the science to still improve on agriculture without having to improve on it chemically. And that really is what regenerative farming does. And it's not just for the food itself, it's also for the land upon which the food is built. And I'll get into more of that here in a second. MAHA proponents believe the controversy will accelerate public awareness about the health risks associated with glyphosate, including links to cancer and environmental damage. The movement calls for a widespread shift to regenerative farming practices that restore soil health, reduce chemical use, and promote biodiversity. Now, look, I know a lot of people, we're conservatives, right? Whenever we hear the term diversity, it's just an instantaneous turnoff. But I can assure you that when it comes to the science of farming, and the word biodiversity is legitimate and it makes a whole lot of sense. And you could take it all the way back to the Bible, and we will here in a minute to explain that. But back to the article first. Regenerative methods, such as cover cropping and rotational grazing, are highlighted as sustainable alternatives that can maintain or even increase yields without toxins. See, the whole the rise of genetically modified organisms in our foods, right? You can trace this back to the 70s and 80s, and really the green light came from George H.W. Bush. The way that it was pitched to, I don't know if it was pitched to him this way, but the way that it was being pitched to the public and to Congress was that this would allow us to improve crop yields so much that not only will we be able to feed ourselves, we'll be able to feed most of the world. In other words, this was supposed to be, and if for those who weren't around or don't recall the 80s, this is, the we are the world era. This is, we got to feed the starving children in Ethiopia. We got to do this. We got to do that. And righteous causes for sure. But the GMO industry really took advantage of it and said, look, we can make these tomatoes bigger. We can make them grow faster. And we can make them grow in less hospitable areas, all with just a little bit of chemical infusion. We make the seeds, we make them line up with our chemicals. They plant the seeds pop up, we spray our chemicals on them, everybody's happy. The next year they buy more of our seeds, they buy more of our chemicals, we get it all. It's like this one continuous cycle that is impossible to ever break free from. They don't tell you that last part, but that really is where many, many, many of the farmers are at today. They feel trapped. A lot of them would go, if they had just enough of an investment or enough time to be able to make the conversion, because it's challenging. I mean, it basically is a cleansing of the land. And the big agriculture, big food, they make it extremely difficult because all it takes is just one little seed. One seed falls off of their old chemically manufactured and manipulated fruits or vegetables, right? Well, I guess not vegetables, but fruits. It lands, and now it's a quote-unquote a Roundup seed, but they didn't buy the Roundup seeds in the following year. So then they get tested, and it's like, holy cow, you got illegal seeds here. We're going to steal your farm. And that's a little bit hyperbole, but you get the idea. That is the concept. They do make it very challenging for farmers to break free. And, I know a lot of people say that Monsanto is pure evil. I think that they are mostly evil. I think that there is a certain capitalistic perspective to it all that's sort of elegant. I hate to say it, but I mean, they created a very strong capitalist model. Unfortunately, it's killing Americans. That sucks. But outside of that, no big deal, right? Back to the article. Emphasizing eating real food, MAHA encourages consumers to seek out organically grown, unprocessed products free from synthetic pesticides and additives, which, again, this is an important aspect of what I'm going to be talking about here in a second, which is self-reliance, taking full responsibility. This isn't about, oh my gosh, President Trump said an executive order, so there's no way I can defend my family. Nope, you still can. You really can. Farmers transitioning to regenerative models report improved soil fertility, lower input costs, and healthier livestock, challenging the industrial agriculture paradigm. Again, what they don't note, and the reality of the situation is that, yes, all of this is true, but it does require a massive move. It could require an entire year of zero productivity in order to do the transition right, or it could require further investments. So even though the end result is good, it's not like, well, if that's the case, why doesn't everybody just switch? They could, and they probably would if they had the resources to do so. I would say many, if not most, would. Critics of glyphosate point to mounting evidence from independent studies and court cases showing its potential harm to human health and ecosystems. The executive order is seen by some as a short-term fix for supply chain issues, but MAHA leaders insist long-term health demands a departure from such chemicals. And it really isn't just the MAHA leaders. It's MAHA moms. It's those who don't even care about MAHA at all, but they're just moms and dads and even kids and brothers and sisters and Americans in general who are starting to wake up more and more every day to the dangers of ultra-processed foods, to the dangers of genetically modified organisms, to the dangers of chemically treated foods, microplastics. The list goes on, and it's ugly. And this is where our food system has gone. Imagine if all of this could be fixed. Imagine if we could take today's non-chemical, non-manipulative technology and apply it to purely regenerative / organic farming. And not just farming, we also need to get into livestock and eggs and everything, right? If we just did things the right way, we've got the farmland, okay? Bill Gates has enough farmland to feed the world. Just Bill Gates alone, if he applied his billions rather, to feeding the world, he could. If he just got out of the vaccine industry, you know what? I'm done poisoning everybody. If he just got off of Epstein Island and said, you know what? I'm done with the Russian girls. If he just stopped being an evil depopulationist, he could actually dramatically improve the food situation, not just in the United States, but globally, based upon the amount of resources that he could put together in a very quick amount of time, based upon the amount of land that he already owns. He could do it. Now, of course, he won't, because he's Bill Gates. Very annoyed by him. Sorry. Ongoing education and policy advocacy aim to bridge the gap between current practices and a healthier, more resilient food system. Boom. All right, so we're going to get into a little bit of the Old Testament on this. I know that scares a lot of you, but there is actually a precedence for regenerative farming that goes all the way back to the book of Leviticus. It's called the sabbatical year, the Shemitah, I believe it's pronounced. It was Leviticus 25, verses 3 and 4. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. Now it's funny because they didn't say, nowhere in the in the Bible does it say that you're supposed to completely stop doing anything at all. You're supposed to like burn the field or anything like that. No. Crops grew. Crops that grew on their own, it's called volunteer growth. They were allowed to grow, and they just couldn't be harvested commercially. They would go to the landowners, to the servants, strangers just walking through, the poor, livestock, of course, and wild animals could use it. Exodus 23:11 says, "But the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie still, and the poor of the people may eat. And what they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat." So it wasn't just for the sake of the land, it was also for the sake of the people. But here's the thing, it really was. And they didn't know it at the time. They trusted God, of course, but they didn't understand what we know now. And something that is funny because very few people, for whatever reason, maybe they don't read their Bible, maybe they just don't like, scientists are always very hesitant to associate, oh my gosh, that was just luck, blind luck. They figured that out. But yes, modern science, especially modern soil science, has actually said, you know what? It sort of makes sense if we were to, let the land, rest every 7 years or so. Yeah, funny stuff. Doing so, according to modern science, we already know what the Bible says, but according to modern science, this will prevent soil nutrient depletion. It will allow natural nitrogen recovery. It reduces pests and disease cycles and restores microbial life in the soil. In other words, the biblical command reflects sustainable agriculture thousands of years before modern agronomy. So we've got modern science calling for us to do things better. We've got the Bible that thousands of years ago showed us a way to make things better. Now, what do? Because not all of us are farmers. I'm not a farmer. I'd love to be a farmer. I wish I had a farm. or at least a nice homestead instead of being stuck in California. And maybe someday I will, Lord willing. But maybe you are already doing that. Either way, we still have more control than I think some people like to admit. Now, we can talk about what the MAHA movement is doing, right? And I would suggest learning. How do we expand the knowledge? How do we make anybody we have access to, whether it's friends or neighbors or even volunteering directly with these various offshoots of the MAHA movement, trying to get the word out, trying to pressure companies to head in that direction. It seems to be working. A lot of them are already doing it, right? They're already pushing for less ultra-processed foods, fewer chemicals, fewer preservatives, fewer whatever. Okay, great. Awesome. But that's still, and I'm not going to dwell on that part because, again, that's more for your personal research. What I will dwell on and try to hammer home is the personal responsibility component. I am a humongous fan of sourcing. I want to source all of my food. I love going with my wife to farmers markets. We have to travel pretty far. Okay, it's not far at all, but it's far to me because I don't like to leave. But, we might have to drive 20, 30 minutes to get to the various ones because you have, if you go to farmers markets often, especially if you go to the local ones, you might find that what we found, which is it's the same, almost the same exact people, right? They'll go to one town on Wednesday and then they'll go to a different town on Thursday. And it's almost, 80%, 90% of it is repeat, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that, right? That's great. But I want diversity, as I talked about before, not just biodiversity in the land, which God told us was very important. And now modern science is reaffirming what he said, but also diversity when it comes to farms. I want to know who's best. I love it. It's like a field trip when I was a kid, right? It's one of those things where you get to learn and you get to explore and you get this amazing stuff at the end called natural food. I love it. I mean, maybe I'm weird. I am weird. But maybe some of you out there would want to do the same thing, and I would strongly recommend doing so. And again, sourcing. And it's not just a matter of, we got to go to all the farmers markets. Let's say that you've got a grocery store or a market that's open every day, and you want to make sure that you're getting good food for your family. You've got the smartphone, right? You got the phone that you can take with you and start doing your research. And it will make for a long day at the grocery store, but it's worth it. And you only have to do it a few times until you find the brands that make the most sense. Right? And you take them and you try it and it's like, this is good. And so this is where I'm going to get my mushrooms from now on. Or you try it and this is good. It's like, wow, this is definitely where I'm going to be getting my bacon going forward. And it's like, this is good. And you might think, man, this one seems healthy, but by golly, it's too expensive. Or wow, that one is properly sourced and it's organic, it's regenerative and it's all this other stuff, but it just doesn't taste very good. So, you can decide how to sacrifice and when to sacrifice. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, you know what, man? I'm struggling to get by with ramen noodles. This isn't just for today. This is with the understanding that, because I've been there, done that, right? I don't want to sound insensitive to those who can't just go to farmers markets and get, $10 a pound tomatoes or whatever. You're looking for inexpensive. I know many of us are. So, you do what you can. And this is where vegetables are a beautiful thing, because even the quote unquote fancy and expensive vegetables and fruits that are organic or regenerative, generally speaking, I mean, they're cheaper than Doritos, okay? They're cheaper than a lot of the foods that people will end up getting. Are they more convenient? No. Well, sometimes they are, actually. I mean, look, I'm that guy. I could take a tomato and eat it like it's an apple, okay? I really can. I love tomatoes. I love olives. I love a lot of different fruits. Not a huge fan of veggies, but I'll eat some, especially with the way that my wife cooks them, which is usually generally amazing. But it's still less expensive than the ultra-processed foods that people think they got to get because that's the cheap stuff. It's not necessarily as cheap as, a bag of avocados or something. I don't know. I don't know what the food prices are where you live. I know where we live. I'm very conscious of it, and I know the differences. But again, in most cases, we're not talking about a huge increase in price. Okay? So, like avocados, well, I use that as an example. Avocados that I can get at like Sprouts or whatever, generally speaking, are about $2.99 a pound. And when I go and get them at the farmer's market, these high quality ones, they're local avocado farm, different kind. It's not the Haas, it's the it's the other avocados that they're thinner. I forgot what they're called. I want to say butter avocado, but that's not right. I forgot what it's called. Anyway, I get those, and they're about $4 a pound. So it's about $1 a pound more, and you get like 3 or 4 pounds of it. And it's like number one, that's a ton of food, right? You got to be careful with avocados because you got a small window there. Probably not the best example, but you get the idea. Source, and stop. Make it to where, number one, you're helping these farms, these markets, these ranches, these people that are out there doing the food the right way. They're doing it organic, they're doing it regenerative, and you're rewarding them for doing so. You're also not rewarding those who don't. And I said earlier, if you missed it, I noted that I hold absolutely positively zero negative thoughts towards any farmer that's stuck with Roundup, stuck with Monsanto and Bayer, stuck with genetically modified whatever, because I think that most of them, again, either got sucked into it or they felt like this was the only way that they could stay competitive. And maybe that's true, but that doesn't mean that we can't strive to make things better. So while President Trump does his thing, which appears to be a negative, but it's opened up again, it's open up kick the hornet's nest. The MAHA hornet's nest is flying around, right? Well, not the nest, but the hornets themselves. They're flying around. They're stinging everybody. We should promote that. We should allow and appreciate the informational, the educational components of that, and we should participate whenever possible. In the meantime, we should be working with hopefully our local, if not statewide lawmakers, and maybe even your national ones. We'll see, but at least the local and statewide ones, to try to get them to make it more favorable, grease the wheels, so to speak, for the organic and regenerative farmers out there. And then on a personal level, making sure that we're making good decisions for ourselves, for our family, within our budgets, and making sure that we are doing everything we can to know the source and to reward those who are rewarding us, because they truly are a blessing. You know, I can tell the difference now. I didn't used to. My wife, she could do it very fast. She was able to do it on day one. It took me a while, but I can now identify, for example, when a chicken is, whatever, Tyson, or when it is organic, or when it's full-blown regenerative. All right. And then you throw in the heirloom aspect of it. That's a whole other ball of wax. It's fun, but this is your food, folks. This is important. And I know I'm rambling, so I'm going to stop now.
It will shock you how much it never happened.